My name is Elias Vance, and the alarm that woke me that morning was the first sound of a day that would change everything. I had served in the Terran fleet for 22 years. I had seen strange things. I had seen hard things, but nothing prepared me for the red light that flashed across my cabin wall aboard the diplomatic ship Olive Branch. The klaxon was low, steady, almost polite, as if the ship itself did not want to believe what it was reporting. I pulled on my uniform as I ran. My boots were still half-laced when I reached the bridge. Captain Holloway was already in his chair, his face pale in the glow of the main screen. Around him, the young officers were trying to look calm and failing. "Report," I said. "3 HFY cruisers," Holloway answered. "They broke formation from our escort. They are turning toward us." I stared at the screen. The 3 ships were large, heavy, and armed. They were supposed to be our friends. They had met us at the border of HFY space one day ago, smiling with their sharp teeth, speaking the careful words of the galactic conquered. They had called us honored guests. They had promised safe passage. Now they were closing in. I looked at the small figure near the back of the bridge. Ambassador Helena Ward stood with her hands folded in front of her, watching the screen. She was 60 years old, silver-haired and famous across 3 sectors for ending wars with her voice alone. She had refused a military escort for this trip. She had said very clearly that a ship of peace did not need guns. I had argued with her. I had lost. "Ambassador," I said softly, "we need to speak with them now." She nodded. Her voice was calm the way it always was. "Open a channel." The comms officer, a young woman named Claire Bennett, tapped her console with shaking fingers. The screen split. On one side we saw the bridge of the lead HFY cruiser. On the other we saw ourselves, small and white and unarmed. The HFY commander filled the screen. His face was long and gray, his eyes yellow, his mouth full of teeth that never quite closed. He wore a dark uniform covered in medals. He looked at us the way a cat looks at a bird that has wandered too close. "Ambassador Ward," he said, his voice was smooth, "I hope you are comfortable." "Commander V. Hex," she replied, "your ships have left their assigned positions. This concerns me. Please explain." He smiled. It was a terrible smile. "The Conquered is far away," he said. "The Conquered has many rules, but here in our space we have our own rules. And one of our rules is simple. The weak do not speak to the strong as equals. You came here in a ship without weapons. You came here with soft words and soft hands. This tells us everything we need to know." Ambassador Ward did not move. Her voice did not change. "Commander, you are a signed member of the Galactic Conquered. An attack on a diplomatic vessel is a crime against every member world. If you do this, you will face consequences you cannot imagine." The HFY commander laughed. It was a sound I will never forget. It was the laugh of someone who has already decided that nothing you say matters. "We have studied your species, human. You are small. You are young. You live on one small planet. Your conquered friends will send angry letters. Perhaps they will cancel a trade deal. And then in 10 years they will forget. This is how the galaxy works. The old lessons must be taught again and again. Today we teach one." He raised a hand. On his side of the screen, I saw his officers moving to their weapon stations. Ambassador Ward turned to me. Her eyes were clear. She was not afraid. Or if she was, she would not give them the pleasure of seeing it. "Commander Vance," she said quietly, "get our people to the escape pods, all of them, now." I did not waste a second. I shouted orders. Alarms changed from warning to emergency. Throughout the ship, 312 souls began to move. Scientists, translators, cooks, medics, and their families. Some of them were children. I remember that most of all. There were children on our ship because Ambassador Ward believed that a real peace mission should look like real people, not like a line of soldiers. I ran through the corridors, pushing people toward the pod bays. I saw a man named Peter Hall, one of our doctors, carrying his little daughter in his arms. She was maybe 5 years old. She was crying. He was whispering to her that everything would be fine. He looked at me as he passed. We both knew it would not be fine. I reached the main pod bay just as the first hit struck. The ship shook. Lights exploded. A deep, terrible groan came from the metal around us, the sound of a wounded whale dying in the deep. I was thrown against a wall. My shoulder burned. I pulled myself up and kept moving. Into the pods, I shouted, "Go, go, go." Families climbed inside. Crew members helped strangers. A young translator named Oliver Grant gave up his seat in the last pod so a mother and her baby could go. He looked at me and gave a small, tight smile. Then he turned and ran back toward the bridge to help more people. I never saw him again. The pods launched. I watched on a side screen as they scattered into space like seeds from a broken flower. And then I watched, and my heart turned to ice as the VHRX ships began picking them off, one by one. They were shooting the escape pods. They were shooting them for fun. I could hear the VHRX commander on the open channel. He was laughing. His officers were laughing. They called out targets to each other. They made jokes. I understood every word because my translator was still running, and I wished with all my heart that it was not. I ran back toward the bridge. I do not know why. Maybe I wanted to be with Ambassador Ward at the end. Maybe I wanted to die on my feet. I do not remember thinking anything. I only remember running. The ship was coming apart around me. Walls broke open. The lights died. Emergency lamps gave everything a red glow like the inside of a wound. I passed the observation lounge. I saw a small shape lying on the floor. A child's shoe, pink with a little flower on the side. I do not know whose it was. I stopped. I picked it up. I put it in my pocket. I kept running. I never reached the bridge. A piece of the ceiling broke loose and struck me. Everything went black. When I opened my eyes, I was in a small maintenance pod, one of the tiny escape capsules used by engineers for outside repairs. Someone had put me in it and launched me. I do not know who. I will never know who. Whoever it was gave me their life. The pod drifted. Its transponder was broken. Its power was low. I floated in the dark and I watched through a tiny window as the olive branch died. The VHRX ships did not just destroy her. They played with her. They fired piece by piece, section by section, stretching it out. They wanted it to last. They wanted the dying to be a show. When there was nothing left to shoot, they turned on the last few escape pods that had slipped past their first pass. The pods were small. They were marked with the bright colors of peace. The VHRX shot them anyway. Then the three cruisers turned and flew away, back toward their home world, as calmly as if they had finished a pleasant afternoon hunt. I was alive. I was the only one. I sat in that tiny pod for 9 days. I had a little water. I had almost no food. My shoulder was broken. My mind was somewhere else. I counted the names I knew. I said them out loud so I would not forget them. Helena Ward, Peter Hall, Oliver Grant, Claire Bennett, Captain Holloway, the little girl with the pink shoe whose name I never learned. 312 names. I said them all. On the 9th day, a Concord patrol ship found me. They pulled my pod inside. A medic put a light in my eyes and asked me my name. I told him. He told me I was safe. I laughed. It was the first sound I had made in days. It was not a happy laugh. I told him very quietly that safe was a word that had lost its meaning. I told him that somewhere out there, the VHRX commander was sleeping in his bed, proud of what he had done. I told him that Ambassador Ward had gone to VHRX space with open hands, and they had taken her life, and the life of every soul on our ship, as a joke. The medic did not know what to say. He was young. He had never heard a voice like mine. He asked me one more question. He asked me if I wanted him to contact anyone on Earth. I looked at him. I thought of the child's pink shoe still in my pocket. I thought of the laughter on the VHRX channel. I thought of everything I had seen and heard. I said, yes, tell them I am coming home, and tell them to prepare. Because this was not over. Not even close. The hearing room on the Concord station was bright, clean, and quiet. The walls were made of pale blue stone. And the ceiling rose so high above me that my voice seemed to disappear before it reached the top. 47 delegates sat in a great circle. Each one came from a different world. Each one wore robes of a different color. Each one looked down at me as if I were a small, broken thing that had wandered into their perfect room. I stood at the center. My uniform was new because my old one had been cut off me in the hospital. My shoulder was in a sling. My voice was steady because I had practiced. I told them everything. I told them about the welcome. I told them about the smiling faces. I told them about the sudden turn of the HFY cruisers. I told them about Ambassador Ward's final words. I told them about the escape pods and the laughter and the 9 days alone in the dark. I spoke for 2 hours. When I finished, I waited for them to speak. I waited for the outrage. I waited for the anger. I waited for anyone, to stand up and say that this was not acceptable, that the HFY Dominion would answer for what it had done. I waited a long time. Finally, the lead delegate spoke. Her name was High Counselor Wrath, and she came from a world called Celion. She was a tall, thin creature with pale skin and 3 eyes. She had been leading the Conquered for 19 years. She was, people said, very wise. "Commander Vance," she said, "we hear your words, we grieve with you, your loss is real, your pain is real, but we must also think of the bigger picture." I stared at her. "The HFY Dominion," she continued, "is a powerful member of this Conquered. They control important trade routes. They have many allies. To punish them harshly would break the peace of many worlds. We must find a measured response, a wise response." A delegate from a world called Kulthar stood up. He was small and green, and he spoke with a voice like dry paper. "Also," he said, "we must ask ourselves, did the human delegation perhaps give offense without meaning to? The HFY are a proud people. Their customs are old. Perhaps Ambassador Ward did not understand their ways. Perhaps she sent too many female officers. Perhaps she did not bow correctly. These things matter to the HFY. We cannot assume the fault lies only on one side." I felt something cold crawl up my spine. Another delegate, this one from a world called Behen, nodded slowly. "The HFY are a warrior culture. To them, an unarmed ship is an insult. It is almost an invitation. Perhaps the human Conquered members should consider whether sending diplomats without proper escort was, in some way, a provocation." I opened my mouth, I closed it, I did not trust my voice. High Counselor Wrath raised her hand for silence. She looked at me with what I am sure she thought was kindness. "Commander Vance, we have decided on our response. It will be firm. It will be clear. The Conquered will issue a formal letter of disapproval to the HFY Dominion. We will also pause trade negotiations for a period of 6 months. We believe this sends a strong message." A letter. A pause in trade talks. For 312 lives. I looked at her. I looked at all of them. 47 faces, none of them human, all of them watching me to see if I would shout or cry or beg. I did none of those things. I stood up straight, I nodded once, I said, "Thank you for your time." My voice did not shake. Then I walked out. In the hallway outside, I stopped by a tall window. I looked out at the stars. My hand found the small pink shoe in my pocket. I had carried it every day since the rescue. A young woman in a Terran uniform stepped up beside me. Her name was Lieutenant Grace Miller. She was my aide. She had been waiting in the hallway during the hearing. She had heard the decision through the open door. Her eyes were red. "Commander," she said quietly, "they are going to let it go. They are actually going to let it go." I looked at her. I smiled for the first time in weeks. It was a small smile. It was not a happy one. "No, Lieutenant," I said. "They are not. They just do not know it yet." We flew back to Earth the next day. The trip took 3 weeks. I did not sleep much. I wrote reports. I read histories. I watched old recordings of the HFY commander, the one who had killed our people, receiving medals on his home world for his so-called victory. He had been promoted. He was now an admiral. He had been given a new flagship. His name was Hexgarin, and he was being celebrated as a hero. When our ship landed in Geneva, there was no parade. There was no welcome. A black car was waiting at the edge of the runway. Two men in dark suits opened the door for me. They did not smile. "Commander Vance," the older one said, "the Prime Director would like to see you." I knew what this meant. I did not ask questions. I got in the car. We drove for an hour. We did not go to the main government building. We went to a quiet road in the mountains outside the city. At the end of the road, there was a small stone house with a garden. It looked like nothing. It was, of course, the entrance to one of the most secret places on Earth. Inside, an elevator took me down, far down. When the doors opened, I was in a long room with gray walls and no windows. A long table filled the middle. 12 people sat around it. I recognized some of them. The Prime Director, a small woman named Adiz Okonkwo, sat at the head. The others were the heads of Earth's military, intelligence, science, and industry. They looked up when I entered. None of them smiled. None of them offered greetings. The Prime Director pointed to a seat at the end of the table. I sat. She looked at me for a long time, then she spoke. "Commander Vance, tell us everything again. And this time leave nothing out, not one detail, not one name, not one laugh, not one pod. We want all of it." I began to speak. This time, when I finished, no one suggested a letter. No one talked about trade routes. No one told me that perhaps Ambassador Ward had given offense. Instead, Prime Director Okonkwo leaned forward and said 4 words that I have never forgotten. "Now tell us again." So I did. I told the story a 3rd time, a 4th, a 5th. By the end of the 2nd day, I was exhausted. My voice was nearly gone. But every time I told it, someone at the table took notes. Someone asked about the weapon systems on the V-Hurak cruisers. Someone asked about the layout of the V-Hurak capital world. Someone asked about the names of the officers who had laughed on the open channel. They were not grieving. They were not protesting. They were building something. On the 3rd day, Prime Director Okonkwo stood up. "Commander Vance," she said, "you will not return to public service. As far as the galaxy knows, you are a broken man sent to a quiet farm to live out your days. You will be seen in small towns. You will be photographed walking dogs. You will become a sad story, a reminder of why humans should stay small and quiet." I nodded slowly. I understood. "But in truth," she continued, "you will be here with us. You will work, you will plan, you will help us do what must be done. We have chosen you because you lived, because you heard them laugh, because you will not forget." She looked around the table. Everyone there nodded. "The Galactic Concord has told us that 312 human lives are worth a letter," she said. "They are wrong. They will learn how wrong they are. Not this year, not next year, but soon." She turned back to me. "We are not going to argue with the Concord. We are not going to beg. We are not going to threaten. We are simply going to prepare. And when we are ready, we will remind every species in this galaxy that peace is a gift humans offer, not a weakness, a gift. And gifts, when thrown back in the face of the one who gives them, are not given a second time." I thought of Ambassador Ward. I thought of her kind smile. I thought of how she had believed, right up to the end, that words could save us. I thought that she had been wrong, but she had been beautifully wrong, and she deserved better than a letter. I stood up. My shoulders still hurt. My heart was still heavy. But for the first time since that terrible day, I felt something else growing underneath the pain, something harder, something patient. I looked at Prime Director Okonkwo and I said, very quietly, "Ma'am, I am ready to begin." She nodded. And that was the day the silence started. From the outside, nothing changed. Earth continued to trade. Earth continued to send polite messages to the Conquered. Earth continued to look small, young, harmless. Human citizens went about their lives, unaware of what was being built far from the public eye. But in the dark places of our solar system, inside hollowed-out asteroids, behind false mining colonies, deep in the cold rings of the outer worlds, something new was taking shape. And while the V-Hurak Dominion celebrated their victory, and the Conquered congratulated itself on its wisdom, a clock began to tick. None of them could hear it yet. But one day they would. 18 months passed. To the rest of the galaxy, those months were quiet. The V'Hurak Dominion grew bolder. They pushed into new trade routes. They bullied smaller worlds. They laughed in public about the cattle species and their silly ships of peace. The conquered continued to issue letters. Nothing changed. Or so it seemed. I had not been idle. For 18 months I had lived inside a mountain. The facility was called Deep Anchor. It did not appear on any map. It had been built over 3 years using construction robots and sealed work crews. It was 2 kilometers below the surface of an island in the South Pacific. It had its own power, its own air, its own private link to the ships being built in the far reaches of our solar system. Inside Deep Anchor, I did not wear a uniform. I wore a plain gray jumpsuit like every other person there. Rank meant little. What mattered was what you could contribute. I was a planner, a voice of experience, and most importantly, the person who had been there. I had seen the V'Hurak. I had heard them speak. I could describe in detail how they thought. I was the memory of the olive branch, and that memory was the fuel that kept the whole project burning. Every morning I walked to a long briefing room where maps of V'Hurak space covered every wall. Every inch of their home world was marked. Every shipyard, every fuel depot, every weapons factory, every officer's home, every garden where the admirals walked their strange 6-legged pets. Our intelligence services had been busy. Small drones no larger than a fingernail had been slipped into V'Hurak space inside cargo shipments. They had watched. They had listened. They had sent home everything they learned. The man who led our intelligence effort was named Director Jonathan Price. He was short, round, and almost always smiling, which was strange because his job was the darkest in the room. He would stand in front of a map and tap it cheerfully. "This," he would say, "is where Admiral V. Hexgarin lives when he is not on his flagship. Beautiful garden, lovely view, 300 guards. We know the shift changes. We know what he eats for breakfast. We know which of his 4 wives he actually likes." Nobody laughed. We did not make jokes about the V'Hurak. Not because it was wrong to, but because it was not useful. Jokes cloud the mind. We needed clear minds. Our head of weapons design was a woman named Dr. Margaret Doyle. She was in her 70s, sharp as a blade, and she had been called out of retirement. She had spent her whole career designing defensive systems. Now, for the first time in her life, she was designing other things. "The Conquered banned kinetic strike swarms 400 years ago," she told me once, standing in front of a hologram of a small, fast ship. "They said such weapons were cruel. They said no civilized species should build them. Humanity agreed, you see. We signed the treaty. But the Conquered made one mistake. They banned the weapons before humanity joined. We never signed. So technically, we are not breaking any rules." "And if they disagree?" I asked. She smiled. It was not a warm smile. "Then they can write us a letter." Our ships were being built in secret shipyards hidden inside hollowed-out asteroids in the Oort cloud. The outer edge of our solar system is a dark, cold, forgotten place. No alien species had any reason to look there. Inside the asteroids, automated factories worked day and night. They built ships unlike anything humanity had ever made before. The first class was called the Nighthawk. These were small, fast attack craft. They did not look like warships. They looked like debris, rocks, broken satellites. They were designed to drift into enemy formations looking like space junk, and then at the right moment to open their engines and strike. The second class was called the Lancer. These were medium ships, agile, armed with weapons the Conquered had banned centuries ago. They could hit hard and move faster than anything the V'Hurak had in service. The third class was called the Shepherd. These were large command ships, built to coordinate swarms of smaller craft. They were not meant to fight directly. They were meant to think, and to tell 1,000 smaller ships what to do all at once. And then there was the flagship. There was only one. It was called the Helena, named after Ambassador Ward. I was told quietly by Prime Director Okonkwo herself that I would command her. I protested. I said I was not the best choice. I said others were more qualified. She looked at me and said, Commander Vance, you are not the best choice. You are the right choice. There is a difference. The Helena will carry a message. The message needs to come from the one who heard the laughter. I had no answer to that, so I accepted. During those 18 months, I learned things I had never wanted to learn. I learned how V-Hurek armor was weakest at the seams between plates. I learned how their commanders gave orders in a rigid chain that, if broken at the top, left the lower officers confused for several minutes. I learned that their warships depended heavily on a single type of fuel that was refined at only 4 locations across their entire empire. 4 locations, that was a gift. Dr. Doyle's team built weapons designed for exactly those locations. Small, precise, unmanned craft that could slip into a refinery from 50 different angles and turn it into a memory. We also built something else, something not made of metal. We built a broadcast. Our communications team, led by a calm young man named Samuel Price, no relation to the director, had been working for months on a message. It was recorded in the V-Hurek language in 3 different regional dialects in voices that sounded exactly like trusted V-Hurek newsreaders. The message was simple. When the time came, it would be sent to every V-Hurek world, every V-Hurek ship, every V-Hurek communications relay, all at the same moment. It would not be stopped. It would not be blocked. It would, we hoped, be remembered for 1,000 years. Life inside Deep Anchor was strange. We lived in small rooms. We ate in a large hall. We trained. We planned. We studied. Once a week, we were allowed to walk in a special garden on the surface, where the sun and the sea reminded us that there was still a world outside. We did not speak to anyone from the outside. Our families had been told we were on long scientific missions. Some of us had stopped counting the days. I did not stop counting. I knew exactly how many days had passed since the olive branch died. I wrote the number in a small notebook each morning. I never showed it to anyone. One evening, Prime Director Okonkwo visited Deep Anchor. She did not announce her visit. She simply walked in with 2 guards and asked for a tour. I showed her the maps. I showed her the weapons. I showed her the command ship simulators. When we were done, she asked if she could speak with me alone. We walked to a small room with a single window that looked out at a wall of stone. She sat across from me. She was tired. She had aged since I last saw her. Her hair had gone fully gray, but her eyes were the same. Elias, she said, using my first name for the first time, tell me honestly, are we doing the right thing? I thought for a long time before I answered. Ma'am, I said, that depends on what we actually do. She tilted her head. Explain. If we go to V-Hurek space and hurt innocent people, I said slowly, then we become what we punish. If we wipe out their cities, their farms, their schools, their children, then we do exactly what they have accused us of being, but worse. We will have proved their lies true. She nodded, go on. But if we go, I said, and we take apart only what they used to kill our people, and we take it apart so completely that no one anywhere can ever confuse it with something else, and we tell the whole galaxy exactly why we did it, then we are not being cruel. We are being clear. We are saying that a certain kind of action has a certain kind of result, always, without exception, for any species, no matter how old or how proud. I paused. Their warships, their shipyards, their factories, their command structures, the officers who laughed on that channel, those things we unmake, everything else we leave untouched, every farmer, every teacher, every child, every grandmother, not one of them will be harmed by us, not one. The Prime Director studied me for a long moment. That is harder than simple destruction, she said. Yes, ma'am. It will take more ships, more skill, more risk. Yes, ma'am. And if we fail, if our weapons go wrong, if innocent V-Hurek die, then we will have failed, I said quietly, and we will say so, and we will answer for it, because the olive branch was not about destroying an enemy. It was about teaching a difference. If we cannot hold that difference even in our own hands, we have no business teaching anyone. She was silent for a long while, then she nodded. That is why you command the Helena, she said. That is why it must be you. She stood, she put a hand on my shoulder for a moment, then she left. I sat alone in that small room for another hour. I thought of Helena Ward. I thought of what she would have said if she had heard our plans. She would not have approved. She would have wept. She would have argued for more talks, more time, more patience. But she was gone, and the people who had taken her from us had laughed, and the conquered had written a letter. So we were going, and we were going to do it the hard way, the right way, the way that would let us still look in the mirror afterward. 2 weeks later, the order came. Prime Director Okonkwo sent a single encoded message to Deep Anchor. The message contained only 2 words. Lift anchor. Across our solar system, hidden factories closed their doors. 347 warships left the shelter of the Uit cloud and began to move. They moved in complete silence. They did not broadcast their positions. They did not communicate with Earth. Each one carried its orders in sealed files that would only open when the moment came. I left Deep Anchor through the same elevator I had entered through 18 months earlier. I went to the surface. I took a small shuttle to a waiting transport. The transport carried me to the Helena, hidden at the far edge of the asteroid belt. When I stepped onto her bridge for the first time, I felt the weight of every name I had carried for a year and a half. Helena Ward, Peter Hall, Oliver Grant, Claire Bennett, the little girl with the pink shoe, 312 names. I sat in the command chair. I looked at the screens. My officers stood at their posts. Every one of them had lost someone. We had chosen the crew carefully. Every officer on every ship in this fleet had a reason, not for hatred, for memory. Hatred burns out, memory keeps. I opened a channel to the fleet. My voice went to every ship, every crew member, every soul about to cross into VHRX space. This is Commander Vance, I said. You know why we are here. You know what we were asked to do. You know what we chose to do instead. I paused, I breathed. We do not harm the innocent. We do not touch the towns. We do not hurt the children. We take apart only what was used to take our people, and we do it so completely that no one ever mistakes our patience for weakness again. We do this with steady hands. We do this with clear minds. We do this because Ambassador Helena Ward would have wanted at least this much to remain of her mission. I looked at the star map. All ships begin approach. No communications, no mercy to weapons, full mercy to all else, on my mark. I waited 3 seconds. I thought of Ambassador Ward's kind eyes. Mark. The fleet began to move. The reckoning had begun. We came out of jump space all at once. 347 ships appeared in VHRX space in a single heartbeat, from 347 different directions. Every approach vector had been calculated. Every ship knew its target. Every crew knew its job. The VHRX defense grid tried to respond. It could not. The grid had been built to detect large fleets approaching from known directions. It had not been built to detect a swarm that appeared from everywhere at once. The first thing we took down was their communications. Not their civilian networks, not their news channels, not their personal calls. Those we left untouched. We took down only their military command channels, the ones the officers used to coordinate warships and bases. We took them down so completely that within the first minute, no VHRX admiral could reach any other VHRX admiral. Every ship, every base, every officer was suddenly alone. Then we moved on the shipyards. The 4 great VHRX shipyards were each visited by a swarm of Nighthawks. The little rock-shaped craft had been drifting near the shipyards for weeks, looking like ordinary debris. Now they came alive. They struck the shipyards at their key points only: the construction frames, the power cores, the weapons testing ranges. They did not touch the worker quarters. They did not touch the maintenance stations. They did not touch the supply ships full of food. When the dust settled, the shipyards were useless. No VHRX warship would be built there for a generation, but no VHRX worker had been harmed. The workers found themselves standing in silent factories, looking at broken machines, alive and confused. Next came the fuel refineries. All 4 of them hit at the same moment. Our Lancer ships came in fast and low. They fired single, precise shots into the refining chambers. The refineries did not explode in great balls of flame. They simply stopped working. The careful heat systems that turned raw material into warship fuel went cold. It would take years to restart them. And then came the fleet action. The VHREC had 211 active warships. They were scattered across their space on patrol and training duty. Our fleet hunted them one by one. We did not chase them into civilian areas. We did not attack ships in orbit near populated worlds where falling wreckage could harm people on the ground. We herded them carefully into empty space, and we dealt with them there. I watched the whole thing from the bridge of the Helena. I did not give many orders. My commanders knew their jobs. My role was to watch, to make sure that no order was ever given that would cross the line we had drawn. If any captain looked even slightly like they might hit something we had promised not to hit, I could override their orders with a single word. I did not have to use that word once. My crews remembered the promise. They held to it. By the end of the first day, 180 of the VHREC warships were gone. Their crews, the ones who had surrendered, were being held in secure transport vessels. The ones who had fought to the end were simply gone, along with their ships. We did not pursue the ones who fled. Let them flee. Let them go home and tell the story. Admiral V. Hexgarin, the one who had killed the Olive Branch, was not fleeing. He was still on his flagship, a massive ship called the Iron Tooth. He had gathered what remained of his personal squadron around him, maybe 20 ships in total, and had taken them to an empty system on the edge of VHREC space. He had sent out a signal on an open channel, demanding to speak to whoever commanded the attacking fleet. I told my communications officer to open the channel. The screen lit up, and there he was, older than I remembered, grayer, but the same yellow eyes, the same sharp teeth. He did not recognize me at first. I had been nobody to him on the day of the Olive Branch, just a face on a screen beside Helena Ward. He had not bothered to remember me. "I am Admiral V. Hexgarin of the VHREC Dominion," he said. His voice was still smooth, still proud. "I demand to speak to the ranking officer of this attack fleet." "You are speaking to him," I said. He blinked. "You are only one man. Who are you? What is your name?" "My name is Elias Vance," I said, "commander of the Terran vessel Helena. I was aboard the Olive Branch. I watched you kill Ambassador Ward. I watched you shoot the escape pods. I heard you laugh." For a moment something flickered in his face, just a moment. Then the proud look returned. "So this is vengeance," he said. "This is what your people call justice. Thousands of warriors destroyed, an empire shaken, over a single diplomatic incident." "It is not vengeance," I said. "Vengeance would have meant hurting your farmers and your children. We have not touched them. It is not justice either. Justice is for courtrooms, and you are not in one. This is a lesson. That is all. We are teaching you and everyone watching what happens when you laugh while killing peaceful people. We are teaching it slowly. We are teaching it carefully. And we are making sure the lesson is seen by everyone." V. Hexgarin sneered. "Your conquered friends will stop you. They will crush your little world for this." "Let us see," I said. I nodded to my communications officer. He opened a second channel. On the Helena's bridge and on every VHREC ship listening, and on every world across VHREC space, the message we had built began to play. It was simple. A quiet voice in perfect VHREC began to read names. Ambassador Helena Ward, Captain Samuel Holloway, Dr. Peter Hall, Translator Oliver Grant, Lieutenant Claire Bennett, on and on. 312 names, each one given with age, profession, and when known, a single detail about who they had loved. Between groups of names, the voice said very simply, "These were the people on the Olive Branch. They came in peace. They were unarmed, they brought gifts, they brought children, they were destroyed for sport by Admiral V. Hexgarin and his officers. We have come to ensure that this never happens again. We will not hurt your cities, we will not hurt your families. We will only remove the warships, the weapons, and the officers responsible. Look around you. Remember, teach your children." Then the names began again. The broadcast would continue for 6 full days. playing on every military channel across VHRX space. VHEX listened for about 30 seconds before his face turned purple with rage. He snarled at me. "You dishonor our people. You humiliate us. This is a blood debt I will collect. I will hunt you through every star system until you are dead." "No," I said quietly, "you will not." I nodded again. The Helena and her escort ships opened fire on the Iron Tooth. The other ships in VHEX squadron had already been targeted by our Lancers. In 43 seconds, the entire squadron was gone. The Iron Tooth itself held out the longest, but even it could not stand against the weapons we had brought. Its engines died. Its shields failed. Its weapons fell silent. The last image I saw of Admiral VHEX was his face on my screen, still trying to look proud, even as the lights behind him flickered and died. Then the screen went dark. 96 hours after the first ship entered VHRX space, our fleet withdrew to a holding position just inside their border. The VHRX Dominion's military no longer existed. Their warships were rubble. Their shipyards were empty. Their refineries were cold. Their command structure was broken. Their feared admiral was gone. But their cities stood. Their children were safe. Their farms still grew food. Their schools still taught lessons. Life on the VHRX home world went on, changed forever but unharmed by our hands. The Galactic Concord sent an emergency delegation. 3 ships arrived at the edge of VHRX space, waving every diplomatic flag they had. High Counselor Wrath herself was aboard. She requested an immediate meeting with the Terran commander. I opened the channel. She stared at me across the light years. Her 3 eyes were wide with shock. "Commander Vance, you must cease this attack at once. The Concord demands it. You have violated every treaty. You have used banned weapons. You have destroyed a member species' entire military in less than 4 days. This is not proportional. This is not acceptable." "High Counselor," I said calmly, "the attack ended 6 hours ago. We stopped on our own schedule. We did exactly what we planned to do, no more, no less. Our weapons have been used precisely. Not one civilian has been harmed." "The Concord will respond," she said. "There will be sanctions. There will be consequences." I nodded slowly. "High Counselor," I said, "allow me to read you a message from Prime Director Okonkwo of Earth. She recorded it for exactly this moment." I tapped my console. The Prime Director's face appeared. She was calm. She was polite. She spoke in the same gentle voice she had used in every Concord meeting she had ever attended. "High Counselor Wrath, members of the Concord, I thank you for your concern. Earth has, after long and careful thought, decided to withdraw from the Galactic Concord. Our withdrawal takes effect the moment you receive this message. We thank you for the years of cooperation. We wish you well. Any Concord ships attempting to interfere with Terran vessels from this point forward will be treated as hostile. This is not a threat. It is simply information. We hope it is not needed. Good day to you all." The message ended. High Counselor Wrath stared, her mouth opened, her mouth closed. I waited politely. At last she said in a much smaller voice, "This is madness. You cannot simply leave. You cannot simply act. This is not how the galaxy works." "With respect, High Counselor," I said, "it is exactly how the galaxy works. It has always worked this way. Your Concord simply pretended otherwise. We played along for a while. When we stopped playing, we were asked to accept a letter as payment for 312 lives. We declined. Here we are." Behind her, I saw the Kolthari delegate, the one who had suggested our female officers had caused the original attack. He was trying very hard to be invisible. He would not meet my eyes. "And now?" High Counselor Wrath asked. "Now," I said, "we go home, we rebuild, we mourn our dead. We continue to welcome fair trade with any species that wishes to approach us honestly. We will not seek conflict. We will not bully anyone. We are, at heart, still the same species that sent an unarmed ship to VHRX space with an old woman and a team of translators. That has not changed." I paused. But the next time someone decides that a human diplomatic ship is prey, they will remember today. And they will think carefully, very, very carefully. That is all we ever asked. The conquered delegation left VHRAC space within the hour. The VHRAC government, what remained of it, issued a quiet message requesting that Terran forces depart. We departed at our own pace. Our fleet was in no hurry. On the journey home, I stood on the bridge of the Helena and watched the stars. The ship felt lighter somehow, though it was the same ship it had always been. My officers moved quietly. No one was celebrating. There were no parties, no songs, no shouts of victory. We had done what we had set out to do. We had done it without crossing the line we had drawn. 312 names had been heard, in their own voices, across the whole of VHRAC space. Every officer who had laughed on that open channel was now silent forever. And every species in the galaxy had seen what happens when humans are treated as cattle. I thought about Ambassador Helena Ward. I hoped somewhere she understood. Back in my quarters, I took out the small pink shoe. I had carried it through every step of the last 18 months. It was worn now, the flower faded. I set it on the shelf above my desk. I did not cry. I had long since cried all my tears. But I stood looking at the shoe for a long time, and I whispered very quietly, I remembered. I remembered all of you. I did my best. Outside the window, the stars turned slowly as the Helena began the long journey home. 6 months passed. I did not expect a parade when we returned to Earth. I did not get one. What I received instead was something harder and more important. I was called to testify before a Terran public tribunal, not a secret one, a public one. Every word I said was broadcast to every human world. The tribunal was not a trial. I was not accused of anything. But Earth had decided, as a society, that an act as large as what we had done must be examined openly. Every military officer involved, from me down to the youngest pilot, had to stand before the tribunal and explain what we had done, why we had done it, and whether we believed it had been the right thing. I stood in the witness box for 3 days. I told the full story slowly and carefully. I did not leave anything out. I spoke about the laughter of the VHRAC officers. I spoke about the letter from the conquered. I spoke about the 18 months of preparation inside Deep Anchor. I spoke about the weapons we had chosen and the weapons we had chosen not to use. I spoke about the line we had drawn and the fact that we had held it. The tribunal chairperson was a woman named Judge Eleanor Price. She was 74 years old, calm and fair, and she had no patience for easy answers. On the 3rd day, she asked me the hardest question. Commander Vance, she said, at any point did you take joy in what you did? I thought about this for a long time. The room was silent. Judge Price, I said at last, I did not take joy in the destruction. I took joy in the reading of the names. When our broadcast played across VHRAC space and 312 names were heard by every creature in their empire, I did feel something. I would not call it joy. I would call it peace. It was the peace of knowing that they had not been forgotten, that their story had been told, that somewhere in the memory of a species that had laughed at them, each of their names now lived. That felt right. Judge Price nodded slowly. And Admiral V. Hexgarin, when he died, did you feel joy at that? I shook my head. No, I felt nothing. I watched him go with the same face I would watch rain fall on a field. It was a weather event, nothing more. Some would say that is a terrible thing to admit, she said quietly. Yes, I answered, they might. But I promised the tribunal honesty, so I will say it honestly. He had become, to me, not a person but a problem. The problem was solved. The commander who felt things about other people had stopped feeling things about him a long time before. Perhaps that is a loss in me. I will not argue with anyone who says so. Judge Price looked at me for a long moment. Then she nodded. She said, Thank you, Commander Vance. You may step down. I stepped down. The tribunal's final report came out 2 months later. It found that the actions of the Terran fleet had been lawful under Earth's own understanding of the situation, necessary given the Conquered's failure to provide justice, and carefully limited so that no innocent person had been harmed. It also recommended that Earth continue to hold itself to the same standard in all future conflicts. no matter the cost or difficulty. It stated, in its final line, that the measure of a civilization is not what it does when angry, but what it refuses to do even when it is fully within its power to do so. I read the report late one evening. I closed the file. I went for a long walk. The galaxy had changed. The galactic Concord, as it had been, no longer existed. Several of its member species had quietly withdrawn after watching what happened to the V-Hurak. Others had stayed, but the Concord's power had been broken. A new body was forming slowly, more humble than the old one. And to my surprise, many species had reached out to Earth, asking quietly if they might learn from us. Not learn to fight. Learn to draw lines. Learn to promise things and keep them. Learn to be clear about what was acceptable and what was not. Human diplomats were suddenly in high demand, not because we were feared exactly. Fear was too small a word. It was more that we were trusted to mean what we said. When a human said peace, peace was meant. When a human said a line was held. And if the line was crossed, the result was known in advance. A young Thessian woman came to Earth as part of a trade delegation. Her name was Kaelin, and she was only a few years into her diplomatic career. She asked to meet with me. I agreed. We sat in a quiet garden near the tribunal building. "Commander Vance," she said in careful, practiced English, "I have studied what happened. I have watched the tribunal recordings. I have read the reports, and I do not know what to make of it." "What troubles you?" I asked. She thought for a moment. "Many things, but most of all this. If your goal was to teach a lesson, then it seems to me that your lesson was not only for the V-Hurak. It was for everyone. It was also for yourselves." I looked at her carefully. She was sharper than her years. "Go on," I said. "I think," she said slowly, "that your species asked a question. You asked, what kind of people are we? And the answer, you said, would depend on what you chose to do when you had every reason to do terrible things. You chose to do difficult things but not terrible things. You drew a line in your own hearts, and the whole galaxy watched you hold it. Am I correct?" I nodded. My throat was tight. "Yes," I said, "you are correct." She looked down at her hands. "And now you carry this, all of you, every officer who was there, every person who planned it, every citizen who voted for the government that ordered it. You will carry it for the rest of your lives. That is not a small thing." "No," I said, "it is not." She looked up. "Would you do it again, if another species attacked your diplomats tomorrow?" I did not answer quickly. I thought about Helena Ward. I thought about Myra, the little girl I had never known but whose shoe I had kept. I thought about the 312 names. "I hope we never have to," I said at last. "I hope that the lesson has been clear enough. But if a species does attack us in exactly that way, laughing as they do it, then yes, we will do what must be done. And we will do it the same way, carefully, precisely, with the line held, because if we ever lose the line, we lose ourselves. And then the V-Hurak will have one after all." Kaelin nodded slowly. She rose. She bowed in the Thessian manner. "Thank you, Commander Vance," she said. "I think I understand now why my own government sent me to meet you." "Why is that?" I asked. She smiled. It was a small, serious smile. "Because they wanted me to learn how to draw lines," she said, "and to hold them, even when it is difficult, especially then." She walked away through the garden. I sat for a long time after she left. Years passed. Earth did not become a warrior species. We did not build great fleets and threaten smaller worlds. We did not take the place of the old Concord as a new ruler of the galaxy. We simply kept being what we had always tried to be. We traded. We explored. We welcomed visitors. We sent diplomats to wherever they were wanted. But everyone knew the rule now. Everyone. The smallest species, the oldest empires, the youngest civilizations stepping into the stars for the first time. Everyone knew that humans came in peace, and that they meant it, and that this peace was a gift. A real one. To be received with open hands, not thrown back with laughter. I grew older. My hair turned gray. My shoulder, which had been broken that day on the olive branch, ached in cold weather. I retired from active service. I was asked to teach at the academy, where young officers, human and otherwise, learned how to become captains and diplomats. My students came from many worlds. Some were human, some were Thessian, some were Kelvari or Behen, or from species that had not yet joined the galaxy when I had first put on a uniform. They all listened very carefully to my lectures. On the last day of each term, I told them the story of the olive branch. I told them about Ambassador Helena Ward and her quiet belief in peace. I told them about the laughter on the open channel. I told them about the Concord's letter. I told them about Deep Anchor and the 18 months of preparation. I told them about the line we drew and the day we held it. I told them always that the story was not a story of glory. It was a story of grief and of the choice that comes after grief. A species can turn grief into rage and become the thing that caused the grief, or it can turn grief into something harder and more patient, a promise, a line, a way of being. I told them that Earth had chosen the second path, and that the price had been high and the responsibility heavier, and that every generation after ours would have to choose it again, for themselves. I would end the lecture the same way, every term. I would say we came in peace, we meant it, we still mean it, but we will never again be mistaken for prey. Then I would close my notes, I would thank the students, I would walk out of the lecture hall. On my desk in my small office I still kept the little pink shoe. Its flower was faded almost to gray now. The leather had cracked. It was a poor, small thing, but I could not bear to throw it away. Every so often, a new student would notice it and ask about it. I would tell them the truth. I would say that I had found it on the olive branch, on the day the ship died, and that I did not know whose it had been, but that I had decided to carry it because somebody had to. Somebody had to remember the smallest, quietest people, the ones whose names were not known, the ones who had been only passengers, only children, only dreamers. Most students listened in silence. Some wept. One young man, a human boy of 18, asked me if I thought the child whose shoe it had been would have forgiven us for what we did afterward. I thought about his question for a long time. I do not know, I said finally. I did not do it for her forgiveness. I did it because somebody had to stand up and say that her life mattered, that all 312 lives mattered, not just in a letter, not just in a moment of silence. In the actual structure of the galaxy that came after, if she could forgive us, I would be glad. If she could not, I would understand. Either way, her life is remembered now. Every species in the galaxy has heard her age, has heard her voice, has heard that she was on that ship. That is the best I could offer her. It was the best any of us could offer her. The young man nodded slowly. He left the office without saying more. On the day I turned 80, I retired from teaching as well. I went to live in a small house near the sea. It was a quiet place, with a garden that I could just barely manage on my own, and a view of the water that changed colors every hour of the day. One afternoon, a ship landed in the field near my house. It was a small diplomatic shuttle, with the markings of the new interspecies council that had formed after the old Concord fell. A young Thessian woman stepped out. She was older now than when I had first met her. But I recognized her at once. Kaylin. She was, I learned, the senior diplomat of her species now. She had come all the way to Earth, all the way to my small house to ask me a single question. We sat in my garden. I poured tea for her. She drank it politely, though I knew it was not to her taste. "Commander Vance," she said, "I came to ask you something. My species is about to face a difficult situation. Another world far from mine has begun treating our trade ships badly, not killing anyone, not yet, but testing us, pushing us, looking for our line." I nodded slowly. "And you want to know what to do?" I said. "Yes." I looked out at the water. The waves were small that afternoon. The sun was low. "Kaylin," I said, "I cannot tell you what your species should do. Every species must find its own line. What worked for Earth might not work for the Thessians. Our line was drawn in grief, and it was held in discipline, and it cost us more than I can say. Your line will be your own." "But how do I find it?" she asked. I turned to her. I saw in her for a moment the young officer she had been, and the student I had taught, and the diplomat she had become. You find it, I said, by asking yourselves what you will not do even when you could. You find it by deciding in advance what kind of species you want to be when the worst happens. You write that down. You teach it to your children, and then when the worst happens, you hold to it no matter how much you want to let go. That is the whole secret. It is very simple. It is also very hard. Almost no species does it. Those that do become something the galaxy remembers. She thought about this for a long time. She drank the rest of her tea. Then she stood. "Thank you, Commander Vance," she said. She paused at the gate of the garden. She looked back. "May I ask one more thing?" "Of course." "Are you at peace?" I looked at her. I thought about it carefully because she deserved a careful answer. "Peace is a strong word," I said, "but I have something close to it. I did what I was asked to do. I held the line I was asked to hold. I remembered the people I was asked to remember. I carry the pink shoe and I teach the students and I watch the sea. That is enough, I think. That is as much peace as any of us who were there can hope for, and it is more than I expected after the day the ship died." She bowed. She walked back to her shuttle. The shuttle rose. It disappeared into the sky. I sat in my garden for a long time. The sun set. The first stars came out. I thought about all of them. Helena Ward, Peter Hall, Oliver Grant, Claire Bennett, Captain Holloway, the little girl with the pink shoe, all 312 of them. And I thought about the galaxy that existed now in their memory. Not a perfect galaxy, not a peaceful one in every corner, but a galaxy where, when diplomats were harmed, it was no longer treated as a small thing. A galaxy where every species knew what a line was and what it meant to hold one. A galaxy where an old woman with kind eyes could be killed by laughing soldiers, and her death could still matter because one species had refused to accept a letter as the final word. That was not a bad thing to leave behind. I went inside as the night grew cold. I set a small lamp burning by the window. I put the pink shoe on the shelf where I could see it from my bed. I lay down. I closed my eyes. I thought, as I often did before sleep, of Ambassador Helena Ward, standing on the bridge of the olive branch with her hands folded, telling the VHRAC commander that he faced consequences he could not imagine. She had been right. In the end, she had been right. They just had not imagined us. I smiled a small, tired smile in the dark. Then I slept.